So good morning, everyone. My name is Praveen Kalra, and with my colleague Margarita Cardona, we are the co-chairs of the Halton Peel Information Awareness and Orientation Partnership. On behalf of the partnership, I would like to welcome you all to today's training session. We would like to begin today's session by acknowledging the land on which we gather. Even though this is a virtual meeting, our agencies work in Peel and Halton, and these regions are part of the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. For thousands of years, indigenous people inhabited and cared for this land. In particular, we acknowledge the territory of Anishinaabe, Huron, Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Ojibwa Chippewa peoples, the land that is home to the Métis, and most recently, the territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, who are direct descendants of the Mississauga of the Credit. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land, and by doing so, give our respect to its first inhabitants. Today's session is being facilitated in collaboration with Peel Newcomer Strategy Group, or PNSG. Before I introduce the presenters, I just wanted to provide you with a brief background about the partnership and PNSG. The Information Awareness or Orientation Partnership was established in 2012 and is one of the 4 partnerships where IRCC-funded organizations come together to address specific areas in an effort to better support the delivery of the language and settlement programs in the community across Peel and Halton region. One of the objectives of this particular partnership is to identify needs and adopt a coordinated and collaborative approach to the facilitation of professional development and networking opportunities for frontline workers in Peel and Halton. On the other hand, PNSG is a community collaborative that engages service providers and stakeholders to coordinate services that facilitate newcomers' settlement and inclusion. As a local immigration partnership, PNSG conducts community-level strategic planning, stakeholder engagement, communications, research, policy formulations, and project management to improve social and economic outcomes for Peel newcomers, immigrants, and refugees. PNSG is a project of United Way Greater Toronto and is funded by Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, IRCC, Region of Peel, and United Way Greater Toronto. Having said that, please allow me to introduce to you our panelists for today's session. Agnes Wilczek is a director with Achieve, formerly known as the Center for Education and Training. Agnes oversees Achieve's Newcomer Information Centers, providing Commissioner of Oath services at its 4 locations in Peel, 1 location in Oakville, itinerant locations, and presently offering remote commissioning. Agnes has been a part of the partnership since its inception in 2012 and has been actively supporting the subcommittee involved in the organizing professional development opportunities for frontline staff from IRCC-funded organizations. Jagdeep Kelly is the Manager Settlement Services with the Peel Multicultural Council, supervising its various programs including settlement, community connections, JSW, and digital literacy exchange program. As a member of the Peel Halton IAOP, he has volunteered on its various committees, including the subcommittee tasked to organize PD opportunities for frontline settlement staff. Jagdeep is a member in good standing of the Law Society of Ontario as a non-practicing licensed paralegal. So once again, welcome, and I hope you enjoyed the training. I'll hand over to Jessica now. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Praveen. So I'm going to introduce Jagdeep, who's going to start off with our presentation. Thank you, Jagdeep.
Thank you, Jessica and Praveen.
Okay, so would you like me to share the slides now, Jessica? Would you like to stop sharing or?
Sure, just a moment.
Okay. Okay, let me start sharing. Mm. 1 second. Are you able to see my
Yes.
screen
Yes,
now?
yes, please.
Okay, so are you able to see your slide?
And
As-
no, I'm
no?
seeing the very first slide on the screen.
Okay. Okay, let me see once again. How about now?
Yes.
Okay, we're good to go.
So that's great. Thank you. So we start.
Yes, please.
Is there a way, you know, half of my screen is covered by pictures of video?
I think
I
you
don't
can
know.
slide those down, Jagdeep, so that they're going along the bottom.
So
Or-
I'll minimize. So now
Yeah.
I don't see nobody, which is good. Okay, thank you so very much, Praveen and Jessica, for your kind introduction, and thank you to everyone who is joining us today. Most of the faces are very well known, names are very well known to us, so it looks like it's going to be a sort of in-house discussion for all of us. Any questions, myself and Agnes will be very happy to address those in whatever limited time will be left after the presentation, or we are always free to speak to you through email or phone later on. So before we begin, here is a thought. What is an oath? It says that an oath creates no new obligation. Rather, a witness who swears to tell the whole truth is under no new obligation to tell the whole truth. A witness who swears to tell the whole truth is under no new obligation to tell the whole truth. So it's very volunteer in nature. An oath reminds him of his duty. He swears to do as he ought to do. It means he listens to his consciousness. That is, he adds an express promise to an implied one. We believe it's there, but he makes an express promise that what he is going to say is truth and nothing but truth. A moral obligation is not capable of addition or diminution. So that's a definition from Noah Webster. Then another one, an oath in law is solemn appeal to the deity made binding upon the conscience by a penalty for perjury. Perjury is it's a word that comes from legal terminology where a person will say something different, but then in the court of law will say something different, and that false statement is perjury. Can we go to the next slide? Now the question is, that's what we try to see what an oath is. But who can be appointed as a oath commissioner? oath commissioner is not, this position is not driven from any legislative authority. It doesn't impose or confer any authority on an individual. It's just that you make a request to be commissioned to witness oaths or declarations. So you are, as an oath commissioner, you are just a witness which can be testified in a court of law if need be. So how commissioners are appointed? One is commissioners by virtue of office. All lawyers and paralegals, once they become members of a law society, they, by virtue of the office, become commissioners of oath. And they remain commissioners of oath till the date they are in a valid or in good standing member of the law society. Then another one is, there are appointments made by the Attorney General Office of Ontario. And the Attorney General may appoint any person of the age of 18 years or over. You will see that there is no qualification as such. You don't have to be an undergrad or whatever. It is just that if you are a person of sound mind and over the age of 18 years, you can be appointed as a oath commissioner. For what? To administer oaths and take affidavits authorized by law within or outside Ontario, or subject to such limits as to duration, territory, or purpose as the Attorney General may specify in the appointment. So for our friend participants here, you will see that when our oath commissioners stamp a document, it says to expire on such and such date, because these appointments are made by Attorney General for a specific period of time, and you will have to renew that for next 3 years or more as per regulations. So this is set in the law, in the act, in the regulation. Important thing is that when we exercise this authority as a notary public or as an oath commissioner, because in this oath commissioner name by itself is such as if you are going to be representing some legal authority, one should refrain from providing legal advice unless retained to do so. What is difference between commissioner of oath and a notary public? This is important for us to understand. Oath commissioners, as we saw before, there are oath commissioners who are by virtue of office, then appointments by Attorney General. We have seen all these things, but on the other side, in notary public, they are, again, all lawyers and paralegals in Ontario are notary publics by virtue of their office. But appointment to this, it holds a high bar. Usually, if appointments are made similar to how Attorney General appoints oath commissioners, if Attorney General have to appoint or makes a decision to appoint somebody as a notary public, then usually this is restricted to very high-ranked government officials or multinational business corporations who have interest in multiple nations or countries. A notary public has all the power of a commissioner for taking affidavits as well. So a notary public will hold a dual responsibility of being a commissioner of oath and a notary public as well. A notary public can verify signatures, marks, or copies of documents that are true or genuine. An oath commissioner cannot verify signatures, marks. That's why it's so important that when an oath is administered by oath commissioner, there must be a verifiable system where you can see that the person is actually making signatures on the document. A notary public can witness or certify and attest the execution of important documents. For example, last will. Last will doesn't have to be executed in a court of law, but it to make it legal, you can have it attested by a notary public or such documents who are of, who might have to be presented in a court of law at a later date. And they can certify and attest a true copy of a document. Thank you, Agnes. So this slide is, I guess, just a repeat of what we have already seen. So we can go to, now here are a few key terms, because when we deal with our clients in settlement sector, these words, affidavit, statutory, declaration, oath, affirmation, they many a times confuse us. So an affidavit is a written statement of facts that is verified by an oath or by affirmation of the person making the statement. And it is given before someone who is authorized to administer oaths or affirmations. Affidavits are often used in court cases. Someone is asking, are you sharing the slides? It appears that many of them may not be able to see the slide if that's the case.
Or maybe sharing the slides after the session?
I'm not sure if that's the question. Perhaps that's it.
Yes. Thank you for the response. Yes, I was asking for after the session.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So here we see that an affidavit is a statement cannot become an affidavit until it has been executed in presence of an oath commissioner. Statutory declaration is a document containing a statement that is verified when the person making the statement solemnly declares that it is true. So here, when we say solemnly declares, it means he or she speaks to his or her conscience. He says, I believe this to be true. A statutory declaration is made pursuant to the Evidence Act or the Canada Evidence Act. It is used in situations where statutes and regulations do not mention or do not allow the use of an affidavit. So in most cases where you need a signed document in front of an oath commissioner, in general purposes, it is a statutory declaration, not an affidavit. Statutory declaration is a solemn declaration made in writing by a person believing it to be true and knowing that it is of the same force and effect as if made under oath. We will speak about difference between oath and a declaration. An oath is a formal declaration or attestation in support of a pledge or promise. So oath is more linked to our personal faith. That's based on which we make certain pledge or promise. So you have to have, a holy book, say Bible, on which you will put your hand on and then make a declaration, and that declaration will be treated as oath. But if we do not have that book in the person's hand, or we do not require that person to do so, then the other way out is to have statutory declaration. And that's in settlement sector, at least in my experience, I have not seen our oath commissioners asking people to put their hand on Quran or on Gita or on Bible to sign declarations. So those are not oaths, those are declarations. Affirmation is a solemn declaration that the facts stated in an affidavit are true, or that a person will tell the truth when testifying. So affirmation is a point where you state few things and then you reaffirm that, you again say. So in an affidavit, you will see that we usually list certain points that need to be attested, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and below you write deponent, you sign it, then again you put affirmation, and then you say, I affirm that my statement given in column or points from 1 to 7 or 6 whatsoever is to the best of my knowledge. So that's the affirmation. Another is, as I did speak about legal advice, here is, and we see so many communications coming from IRCC as well, advising us to stay away from legal advice. So here is the thing, what is legal information and how it is different from legal advice? Information is general information about law that doesn't apply to an an individual's specific situation. So it doesn't speak to a person's specific situation, and it is to help a person understand when a problem is a legal problem. You discuss options and possible next steps, including when and where a person can get more help, including legal advice. So when we make a referral, somebody comes to us as a settlement workers and says, you know, my son, he has been entangled in a fight with another boy in the school, and there is the police has charged him. What should I do? So when we speak to that person and talk to him about Ontario laws and how this conflict can impact his or her child's career in school, that's legal information. We might give him more resources, but if he would want us to know what he should be doing, how should he be representing his, or his son should be representing his case in front of the police, then we tell them to go to a lawyer or a paralegal. So that referral is for that person to seek legal advice. And it is often called public legal information or legal rights information. We have our right to know what legal information is out there based on which we can defend our personal rights. And it is generally given by community workers, advocates, or anyone having up-to-date knowledge about a particular area of law. There are so many areas of law. Immigration is one among them, and in many cases, settlement workers inadvertently end up giving advice in one particular area of law, that is immigration law, which we should avoid. Say, for example, one example of legal information would be IRPA, which is Immigration Refugee Protection Act of Canada. It requires you to live these many or certain number of days in the last these many years to maintain a residency obligation as a permanent resident. This is public information. This is legal information. But if we tell that individual that in your case, you're likely to meet residency obligation because you have lived in Canada for these many years, that will become legal advice because we do not hold that authority to provide legal advice. This is where we as settlement workers should draw a fine line. What is legal information and what legal advice is? Next, Agnes. Now, what is the role of a settlement worker and intake counselor to set up appointments for oath commissioning services? In most cases, this is how it should happen. First is assess the eligibility, both in terms of client's eligibility for organization services, because each organization has its own eligibility criteria, and that client should meet that criteria, that particular criteria, and then eligibility of documents to be commissioned, because they cannot present any document in front of us. Say, for example, I guess Agnes will speak in detail about what sort of documents we should be presenting for commissioning. Then review documents with the client and confirm the documents are ready to be commissioned. Please sit with your client and explain step-by-step procedure. Check for mutual availability of oath commissioner, client, and settlement worker, because there are going to be three parties involved in this process. One is the client, another is the settlement worker, and the oath commissioner, and confirm to the oath commissioner of that particular availability and setting up the appointment. Then create a Google Meet or Zoom Meet link if the request is for a virtual service, and invite all concerned parties. Kindly be available with the client during the oath commissioning service, because oath commissioner would not know much about client's situation and his need to have a particular affidavit or declaration made. Save a copy of the signed document, whether that is physical or electronic, in client's file, and make appropriate entry in the client database. For example, OCMS or any other database that our organizations do maintain. How to maintain records? This is just an example. Because once we commission a document, that becomes organizations' obligation to maintain record of this service, so that if at a later date there are issues and you have to present it somewhere, you can actually trace when and what document was commissioned. So usually what we do at my organization, when somebody comes to me, so we have opened a unique and separate register for each oath commissioner. So it will have columns like this: serial number, date, client's name, service provided, and how many service counts, and with whom it has been filed within PMC, and comments if any. This register is maintained by the oath commissioner. Then what I do is, as an oath commissioner, when I execute a document, after putting my stamps, I put this serial number. Say, for example, in the case of Rosemary Smith, below my signature and my stamp, I'll put number 1832. So that if this client will come back and say, this is the document you oath commissioned, I know it is 1832. Immediately I have a cross reference in my register to say, yes, this person came on 16th September 2020. His name or her name was Rosemary Smith. She did a declaration in front of me, and I just made one document, or I commissioned just one document. And with whom? Then this is the name of the settlement worker, filed with whom. So if it is John, I can go to John and request him to take that particular document out. Please remember that there is a limitation period. A document and the limitation period varies from service to service. But say, for example, a person, in most civil matters, the limitation period is 2 years. So if you help somebody make a declaration and at later date, this document becomes a matter of court litigation, then it is our legal duty to present this document in the court of law as an evidence for whatever we did for that person. So kindly make a good record and keep it safe and traceable. Thank you, Agnes.
And I think we have a question from Tasbir. Please.
You want to address questions now, or you want
Someone
to...
raised their hand, so there was a hand raised. So maybe just before we break, because we are going to be breaking for 10 minutes shortly, maybe we can just respond to Tasbir's question. Tasbir, maybe you want to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thanks, Agnes. Jagdeep, the question here is, you mentioned about serial number, like for example, 1832. Do you suggest that to write that down on the declaration that we are signing and keep a copy of that page for ourselves, or the commission or the settlement council should, they have a copy because they printed it out?
You said it almost in the right way, Jaspreet, because this number, when I sign on the original document, this number is on the original document, then I request my settlement worker to make a photocopy of that document which has been commissioned. So naturally it goes in the client's file as well. And I have it on my register, and the copy that client takes home, this number is written on that copy as well.
Great, thank you. That's a very good, valuable information. Thank you.
You take care. Bye. Agnes?
Okay, well, thank you, Jagdeep, for that first portion of the presentation. We are going to take a 10-minute break, but one question that keeps coming up is if the slides will be shared. Is that all right with you both if we share the slides after? So we'll follow up with an email after with the slides, a recording link, as well as an evaluation survey for your feedback. So for now, we'll take a 10-minute break. I'll put a timer on and we'll come back after that time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, it looks like we have about 1 minute left, and then we'll pull everyone together again. All right, we're going to start in about 25 seconds. So if everyone can come back to your computers, and we're going to resume our webinar information session. So I'm going to stop sharing the timer here. Just a moment.
Yeah, let me see if I can pull up the slides again.
Okay, let me just stop sharing just a moment. There we go.
Okay. No?
Yes, it looks good.
Okay. Are you seeing the full screen or is it like a break? Yeah, a full screen.
No,
Okay.
it's full screen. Yeah, it looks good.
Okay, perfect. Okay.
Oh, so just before we begin, maybe I'll just flag for those who haven't noticed in the chat box. Cassandra from PNSG has noted her email. And if you have, if you want to send her an email asking for the slides or the recording link, then she can follow up and send that over to you after the information session. So her email is cbangay@uwgt.org. And now that we're all back, I'll turn it over to Agnes to continue with our information session.
Great, thank you, Jessica. Welcome back, everyone. So in the second part of our session, we are going to be covering some of the typical requests that come for the Settlement Commissioner of Oath services. Some of the services that we would not accommodate clients with, and we would refer them to a notary public service, so paralegals or lawyers. And I will also share with you a process that have been implemented by some agencies last year of remote commissioning. So to start with, let's look at the typical requests that do come to our agencies, our respective agencies for the Commission of Oath Services. So any type of forms, statutory declarations, and affidavits that are required for submissions to different regulatory bodies like Medical Council of Canada or Pharmacy Council, or any regulatory body for that matter that would actually accept documents that are commissioned by a Settlement Commissioner of Oaths. Affidavits and sworn declarations of support and custody, and good examples of that, and something that you probably frequently see coming your way as requests are applications for OSAP or applications for subsidized housing. Invitation letters, those I'm sure you see a lot requests for when our clients are inviting their families from back home, and they are requesting for the invitation letters to be attested by the commissioners. And on the other spectrum, we also see requests coming for travel consent letters when minor children are traveling with one of the parents or a designated individual, they're traveling outside of Canada. So those requests come, quite frequently our way, and they're signed if the request comes for someone who's traveling with for a child traveling with one parent, and the other parent signs that consent. If there's a designated individual who is not one of the parents, then both parents appear in front of the commissioner and sign the consent letter. However, the Justice Department does recommend that these type of letters are to be done by a notary public service because Sometimes, rarely, but sometimes the border security agents will question why such documents are commissioned or attested by a commissioner for taking affidavits instead of a notary public, where there's that red seal that you all know how it looks like on the document. So we will not deny the service when clients come and request for it. However, we will alert them. We will alert them that this may be questioned when the child is traveling. And another quite popular request that comes our way, especially during the month of October, November, and December, is for the life certificates. And in most cases, it's from those individuals, seniors who are collecting pensions back home, and they need to submit their life certificates every year on an annual basis back home, so they can continue receiving their pensions while living in Canada. The other request that we see quite frequently as well is for certified true copies of original documents. However, this is something that is only offered at selected organizations, and this is as per their internal guidelines. So when you are part of an organization that does provide Commission of Oath services, please check with your manager and your colleagues who are the commissioners, whether your agency or your respective agency that does provide this type of service, or if you are referring your client to another service provider, please check with them before referring to your client. Please check with that organization whether they do provide the service of certifying true copies of original documents. Another frequent request that we see comes for affidavits for translated documents, and we'll talk about those translations in a second. Immunization exemption forms, those are the forms that the parents, legal guardians request to be completed and witnessed by signatures witnessed on the forms by the commissioners when they are submitting them to schools for their children if they don't want them to be immunized. Other requests that we're not mentioning here are affidavit statutory declarations that are for settlement and employment purposes if the commissioner for taking affidavits is listed as an authorized designation to attest the document. So we always have to keep in mind the purpose, the mandate of our programs, and the type of services that we're mandated to deliver under our funder, and that's in relation to settlement and employment. So this is, these type of documents are meant to support our clients with their successful integration in Canada. So if the commissioner for taking affidavits is mentioned in the guidelines, then we will be able to assist our clients with the type of document that they're coming with. A tip here is just to keep a log register for the type of services provided under the commissioning, and keeping a copy of the documents commissioned in the file of the respective client. And that's something that Jagdeep already mentioned before we went on the break. So the translations, the IRCC translations. So as we all know, IRCC will accept documents that are translated by non-certified translators when they're accompanied by an affidavit. And the affidavit will say that the translation is an accurate version of the original text, and the translator, the non-certified translator, will swear on a holy book or declare through a statutory declaration to the fact that the document is being an accurate version of the original document. And as mentioned by Jagdeep earlier, this can be performed either by a notary public service or the Commissioner of Oaths service as well. Here's another tip for that IRCC will most likely take affidavits for translation from settlement commissioners when intended for settlement purposes, like renewal of their PR card. That's just one of the examples, but it's recommended to avoid it for the purpose that is related to an immigration matter. And that may become a challenge if the translation is done by a non-certified translation and accompanied by an affidavit or a statutory declaration, where IRCC may say that they will not accept it, and it has to be authorized by a notary public service. So in that situation, the application process for your client will be delayed, because if such attestation is submitted to IRCC along with the application that they're sending, and it gets rejected, and the client is being asked to provide a document attested by notarized by a notary public service, then that really delays their process, and that may have some implications for them. Okay, so I just talked about the typical requests that we are able to accommodate our clients with. And here are some key documents that we are not commissioning as settlement commissioner of oaths. We shouldn't be commissioning, and we should be referring our clients for such documents, for attestation of such documents, to paralegals and lawyers who will be able to assist them with these type of documents. Of course, not free of charge, but it will have to be done by notary public services. So any type of contracts, binding contracts and agreement between the two or more people, anything that is profit generating or used for commercial reasons, we avoid any type of court documents, verification of bank accounts or financial statements, proxies, any type of proxies for financial purposes, and as Jagdeep mentioned before, wills and powers of attorney. This is not something that the commissioners will be able to assist our clients with. Any type of documents for insurance purposes, theft, and real estate related purposes. Those are the type of services and documents that we will not be able to commission as commissioners. We will have to be referring clients to legal services, to paralegals and lawyers for that type of support, or any type of document that may be related to settlement and employment that has been already signed. Because the purpose of our service under the Commission of Oath Services is for the document to be signed in front of the commissioner performing the transaction between them and the client, whether it's in person or in the virtual environment. Okay, so some additional general information about the service provision. So the service of a commissioner can be offered to anyone, regardless of their status in Canada, as long as they're able to provide a valid identification. So the key word here is valid identification with their signature. Commissioning of documents has to take place in the province of Ontario, because as the commissioners for taking affidavits are appointed as the commissioners by the Ministry of the Attorney General to provide this type of service within our province. And those documents have to be, the documents have to be in connection with the business that is conducted by the organization and the eligibility criteria of the program that is providing the service. So going to the first bullet point, when we say that the service can be offered to anyone regardless of their status in Canada, if the Commission of Oath Services provided by your respective agency is under the umbrella of IRCC, and there's a strict eligibility criteria where we are only able to provide the service to permanent residents and convention refugees, those with the status, then you may not be able to assist your client who is not who doesn't hold that immigration status, you may not be able to assist them with that support, and the client may have to be referred elsewhere. So it's best to check with your manager and your colleagues who are commissioners at your respective agencies whether you're able to accommodate the request of someone who is not a PR card holder or a convention refugee. An affidavit must be written by the client. So it can be typed or handwritten, but the commissioners should not be preparing the letters, the statements for their respective clients. We as commissioners most likely will be able to provide a template for such a document because we know how, what type of wording is being used, in cases of statutory declarations or affidavits. So those who have been in the role of the commissioner for many years and settlement workers who have been working closely with the commissioners, they have series of different templates that are required for the purpose, for the purpose of the client request. But ultimately, it's the client who needs to be filling out the template, completing the form, the letter, the declaration, or what have you, or change it, not the commissioners themselves. The commissioners do not hold the liability over the authenticity of the content of any affidavit or a statutory declaration. The main role of as a commissioner during the transaction, during the service provision, is to verify that the client is indeed who they say they are and that they are signing the document in the presence of the commissioner. So verifying the identity of the individual who receives the service is the key here. And again, whether it's in the in-person environment or a virtual environment, that has to be happening in real time. If the affidavit regards the identity of a minor, like the travel consent letter, for instance, the minor must be present during the signing process. So even though the parents or one of the parents is signing the form, we are requesting the minor to be present during the appointment. Also, if there are some clients who are facing some language barriers that are in a need of this type of service, so any person can act as an interpreter as long as they're fluent, of course, in both languages, and are also able to provide us with their photo identification. So we also need to ID the person who acts as an interpreter, and the interpreter who is present, who is interpreting, must also sign a statement outlining the accuracy of the translation of the document to the best of their knowledge. So, but again, the interpreter holds no responsibility for the validity of the content. It's the client who is responsible for the authenticity, the validity of the content. And we would also ask the interpreter again to ask for the valid identification. So that was so I've captured some of the practices for commissioning in general, some of the guidelines that we need to follow as commissioners that it's good for you to be aware of when you're referring to your clients to the commissioning services, the type of documents that we would commission, the type of documents that we wouldn't commission. So at this point in time, I would like to share with you some best practices and processes for remote commissioning, because as most of you probably know, about a year ago or so, the Ministry of Attorney General have adjusted their guidelines for commissioning by including the remote commissioning as an option for certain documents to be commissioned. It was done due to the pandemic, where we were in lockdown, and most of the in-person services for commissioning were not accessible by clients, whether it was in our settlement setting or even many lawyers and paralegals were not able to provide that service in person. So as an effect of COVID, the ministry they've adjusted their guidelines. And so now, since last year, we're able to provide remote commissioning. Not all agencies providing commissioning services have adapted the remote commissioning. There are a few agencies providing it, and not all. So if you're not sure whether your agency is providing the service, please check with your supervisor and your commissioners, colleagues who are the commissioners. Or if you are referring a client to another service provider that does provide commission of oath services, please verify with them first whether they're able to accommodate your client through a virtual commissioning or not. So the typical services that are requested or are able to be accommodated, we are able to accommodate remotely, are oaths, if this is something that that is provided by your agency, letters of invitation and travel consent letters, affidavits and declarations like the OSAP affidavits, for instance, statutory declarations where the designation of the Commissioner of Taking affidavits is mentioned, immunization exemption forms, and life certificates. We do not provide remote service for certifying true copies of original documents. So those agencies providing the certification of true copies, they're not able to provide this through a remote service because you're not able to verify the original document and make a copy from the original document before certifying it in the virtual environment. So those are, this type of service is not provided in a remote setting. So before booking a remote appointment, and Jagdeep already briefly mentioned the process for booking an appointment, and again, these are best practices. So please do not quote Jagdeep and I when we talk about the process, because it may be more specific. It may be a bit different in your internal process. May be a bit different from what we're sharing with you. This is something that we do at our respective agencies, something that we've seen and observed as best practices, but this may not be something that your agency follows. So please, again, check with your manager what kind of process you have in place at your agency. But these are just some general rules, general and best practices that we wanted to share with all of you. So one important piece of information is that before booking a remote commissioning appointment, your client should be urged to verify that the receiving organization, whether it's a regulatory body or another organization, can accept it. Because not every receiving organization will accept a document that was commissioned remotely, and that's based on their guidelines and their protocols. So it has nothing to do with how the documents are commissioned remotely, but it's their rules. We know and we see that more and more organizations started receiving documents that are attested remotely, which is a good thing. So that's on the client. The client we wouldn't really advise the client who accepts documents that are being remotely commissioned. It's the client who is verifying that information. If they're not sure, if they can't get in touch with the receiving organization, we always prefer that, or suggest that the client seeks in-person commissioning services. And last year, it was not so easy. We were in lockdown, so very limited in-person services. But now, since July, August, most of our agencies have reopened for limited in-person services. So the in-person commissioning is more accessible these days. So once the appointment is scheduled, the client will receive, and whether it's the commissioner who's taking the lead on scheduling the appointment or you as a settlement worker, again, it's your internal process, but the client will receive a Zoom or Google Meet invite for the time slot booked. For the simplicity of it, I will just use Zoom as an example for the virtual interaction between the client and the commissioner. So that is booked. The client receives the Zoom link, and they are both set for the virtual appointment. At that point in time, the client is informed that the document or documents will be signed by them, witnessed and attested by the commissioner during the Zoom call through an exchange of information via an electronic signature platform like DocuSign or Adobe Sign or any other electronic signature platform that your agency or different agencies may be using. So they need to know that it's not an exchange of emails. It's going to be happening actually in real time, because the responsibility of the commissioner under the ministry's regulation to administer oaths and declarations remotely is to see the client virtually. So they have to be seeing each other while the service is being performed. The client will need to have the document ready prior to the appointment. So whether it's in a Word format or in the PDF format, it doesn't matter, but the document will not be produced or will not be created during that Zoom call, during that appointment. It will have to be done prior to the actual appointment. And preferably, the document would, along with a scanned copy of a valid photo ID of the client, would be shared with either the commissioner or the settlement, again, depending on your internal procedures, prior to the Zoom call, so the commissioner can verify if this is a document that they're able to sign, that it's not missing any information. So that can be verified prior to the Zoom call. So it's all quick and efficient, and it doesn't take so much time during the Zoom call. And the client and the commissioner can focus on the signing piece. So on the day of the appointment, the client calls the commissioner on Zoom. The commissioner will verify the client's identification document and its expiry date. So even though the document was most likely already scanned and sent to the commissioner prior to the meeting, the commissioner will also ask the client to show them on the screen, like through the webcam, the document that they're using as their identification for the purpose of the commissioning service. So if that's all done, the commissioner is satisfied with the ID, the document that is being commissioned is fine, ready to be commissioned. The client is who they are, and they're ready to start the signing process. So at that point in time, the commissioner will initiate the electronic signature process by sending the documents to be signed to the client. So depending on which platform they're using, the organization I'm with, we use DocuSign for that purpose. So we would initiate, one of the commissioners would initiate the process via DocuSign by uploading the document to be commissioned into the DocuSign and then submit it. So send it electronically to the client for their signature. At that point in time, the client will receive the request from us, from the commissioner, to electronically sign the document. So they don't have to print it. They don't have to sign it, handwrite their signature. It's all based on an electronic signature. So they will receive that request for signature in their inbox, in their email. They're checking their email, they're opening the document, they're electronically signing the document, and then they hit a button, submit or process or whatever it is. And at that point in time, this document comes back automatically to the commissioner with the client's signature. So at that point in time, the commissioner will insert the jurat, and it most likely will be in an electronic format. It has to be in an electronic format in order to state and indicate that this service is being provided remotely. So that's when we know, or the receiving organization of the document will see that it was not done in person, it was done remotely, and this is the requirement of the ministry. So that wording has to be, the highlighted wording has to be inserted into the jurat when the service is being provided remotely. Then we include also the information, we insert the information about the type of document that was verified during the provision of the service. And at that point in time, the commissioner will insert their electronic stamp. So all commissioners, if they are working in this virtual environment and are providing remote services, should have an electronic copy of their stamp, their commissioning stamp, that they can insert, they can put on the document that is being commissioned. And they will also sign the document. So they will have an option of signing the document electronically and providing their contact information. It's always vital for us to provide our contact information on the document that we commission should the receiving organization want to contact us in order to verify if we in fact commissioned the document that was submitted to them by our client. So in the virtual environment, again, it's a best practice. It's not a requirement. It's not something that is mandated. We are providing our email address for the purpose of remote commissioning. So once the commissioner signs electronically the form and inserts all of the required pieces of information, it's being sent back to the client automatically. So they hit a button, submit, process, or what have you, and that automatically sends the fully commissioned document to the receiving client. So while still on the call, they're still on the Zoom call when they are performing those, going through the process. At that point, the commissioner will check with the client if they received a fully signed document. If they confirm, then the appointment ends and both of them leave the Zoom call. And at that point in time, the commissioner will log the service in the remote service logbook, just like, using a similar logbook to what Jagdeep shared with everyone earlier in the presentation. Some commissioners will keep separate logbooks for remote commissioning and separate logbooks for in-person commissioning. Some of them will combine it. And again, it's an internal preference. So this is an example of a statutory declaration that is administered remotely. All of the information is made up. So the passport information and other information is not real. So what you're going to see on the statutory declaration, you will be seeing the actual statement, right? And under the statement on the left side, you will see the jurat. That's clearly indicate that it was done in a remote, through a remote service. To the right of the jurat, you will see an electronic signature of the client. Right underneath, you will see the information that is inserted by the commissioner that indicates which type of document was verified during the service provision. And then under that, you will see the stamp. This is the electronic stamp with the name, and that's blocked because that was an actual name of a commissioner, of one of our commissioners. So the name of the individual who is performing the service, their signature, and also their email address underneath. So this is how you would see how you would how a document that is being remotely commissioned would normally look like. And again, this is something that is performed through DocuSign. So if your agency is providing remote commissioning and is using another e-signature platform, it may look slightly different. But if you're using DocuSign, then this is how it would look like. So before we go to the Q&A part of our session, we just wanted to share with you the list of settlement service organizations in Peel and Halton providing Commissioner of Oath services. So we have 10 agencies providing services, in-person services. It doesn't mean that all of the agencies are providing remote commissioning. And when we delivered a similar training session to the commissioners back in March, and we did a bit of a research of which agencies do provide remote commissioning back in March, it was the first 3 agencies, organizations, Achieve, CCS, and Center for Skills. But I'm pretty sure that since March, more agencies have started providing remote commissioning. And this is now something that is available for their clients as well. So they're able to provide the hybrid service in person and virtual. If in case you are you're from one of the agencies listed here and you're attending the session and your agency is providing remote commissioning and I haven't mentioned the name, please let us know in the chat box so you can share with everyone if you have started offering this service remotely. So I think this is it and before we go to the Q&A, Jagdeep and I would like to share with everyone our contact information. So should you have any questions, anything that we will not be able to respond during the Q&A part, something that comes to your mind that you're not sure about and you would like to follow up with one of us, feel free to do so. But we also encourage you to check with your supervisors and the commissioners at your respective organizations, because as I have mentioned, some of the best practices that we have shared may look a little bit different from what you have in place. So we don't necessarily want you to go back to your agencies and start changing the process because that's something that you've been, you've learned in this session. So you may want to share with with your colleagues, what you learned in today's session, but please do not change the process, your internal process based on our presentation, because it's just sharing some best practices. Some guidelines and protocols are strictly related to the ministry's guidelines, so we can be flexible around those. But when booking appointments, whether it's in person or remote, it's an internal process. So you really have to get to know the process that works for your respective agency.
Super. Thanks so much, Agnes and Jagdeep. And I know that we have some questions, but I just want to thank you both for your expertise, sharing your knowledge. And there's a lot of diligent work in the background trying to set this up so that it all moved along smoothly. So thank you so much. And also, just want to remind everyone that this session will be repeated tomorrow at the same time, starting at 9:30. So if you want to pass on the word to your colleagues, that would be really helpful to spread the word about this great session. And we will be sharing an evaluation to those who email Cassandra. So again, her email is in the chat box, cbangay@uwgt.org. And so now I'll move on to some of the questions that were asked in the chat box. First, we have a question from May. So she's wondering if the settlement worker is allowed to translate the document relevant to IRCC, such as birth certificates. So I'll pose that to Agnes or Jagdeep.
Jagdeep, would you like to respond to that one? And you're on mute.
Thank you, May, for the question. I guess as Agnes was saying, there has to be a critical balance between what can we do for our clients and what not. So first is to check within if a translation request is directly related to the settlement needs of a newcomer clients, we should. And the second part should be how much time it's going to take of a settlement worker's time, because of there are so many other things that settlement workers are usually required to do. There are deliverables. So in most cases, what can happen is that the client who comes is fully knowledgeable of the native language or the language they bring the document in, and perhaps that client can be helped to encouraged to translate it and then bring that to the settlement worker to save time. But again, my request would be to keep these service provisions strictly restricted to settlement needs of newcomers.
Great, thank you. The next question is from Marina. Translations of documents and stamps on passports, as long as an affidavit is attached, is this okay for Canadian citizenship application?
Can you repeat the question, Jessica?
Sure. So for translations of documents and stamps on passports, as long as an affidavit is attached, is that okay for a Canadian citizenship application?
I would say yes.
Okay, great. That's an easy answer. And then we have a question from Rashmi. Is it possible to get the list of agencies who are commissioning remotely? Is there a list somewhere?
I don't think there's a formal list. I think the best way to find out which agency is providing remote commissioning is to actually reach out to the 10 settlement agencies providing the service, because that might have changed, and as I mentioned before, back in March, we knew that there were 3 agencies providing the service. That might have changed from, since then. And there's no formal list. The ministry will not have anything on their website. We as the partnership, we don't really keep track of that. So again, I think the best way would be to reach out to the agencies, to the organizations, to find out whether they do provide remote commissioning or not.
Agnes, if you can help, I guess this way, 3 organizations who were doing virtual services at the time when we did session in March, if you can put their names in the chat box, then
Yep.
PMC is the one who started doing after that day. And perhaps if there are other organizations and we have representatives from those organizations, they can put that particular organization's name in the chat box.
So I will put the names here. So Achieve, CCS, Center for Skills, PMC. Anybody else, please unmute yourselves and and let us know. I'll just put the 4 names for now, okay?
Great, wonderful. So again, if anyone has any questions, you can use the chat box or raise your hand. So the next question is from Daisem, who says, hello, thank you so much for this interesting presentation. The question is, what is the process or requirements to become a commissioner of oath? Are there any links to get detailed information on this?
Jagdeep?
Yes, please. Oh, okay, sure. As I said in my presentation, that any person of 18 years of age, of sound mind, can make a request to the Attorney General office. The simplest way is to Google search. There is a guide for appointment of oath commissioners in Ontario, and that guide has been prepared by the Office of Attorney General of Ontario. So that guide explicitly describes the whole process, and they hold the authority whether to release an oath commissioning stamp to someone or not. But in our settlement sector, most usually a request is made by the executive director or someone who can act on behalf of the executive director to appoint someone for the organization.
If I could add on a little bit to the response, yes, and very good point, Jagdeep, that if you are working for a settlement agency and you would like to become a commissioner for taking affidavits, it's your agency, it's the ED of your CEO or the senior management of your agency who would need to submit an application to become an organization that does work with commissioner for taking affidavits under their umbrella. So when you're appointed, you work for an XYZ agency, settlement agency, and you are appointed as a commissioner for taking affidavits, you only hold the commission while working for that settlement agency. When you leave that settlement agency that did apply for your appointment, for the appointment on your behalf, you will lose that status. You will have to be appointed by the ministry again if you move from one agency to another. This is what my understanding is of the ministry guidelines. However, it's always important to go to the source for the right and the accurate information. So it's the Ministry of the Attorney General, Commissioner for Taking Affidavits Appointments. This is the section where one would find more information about how to become a commissioner and what are the obligations, the rules to follow.
Another point, Agnes, thank you. It's helpful. Another point, I guess, is one is what our stamp or what stamp of an oath commissioner says. There will be explicit, demonstration of that. However, kindly remember that when an organization makes application to the appointment for appointment to the Attorney General office, they give a description why this seal is needed. And you put it in writing that these are some of the reasons why we want this stamp for PMC, for example. And then if we go off the tangent later on doing things that were outside the scope of our given statement to the Attorney General and matter goes to the court, we can create a huge liability issue for our organization. So it's not about what my heart says, my brain says on a particular day. That particular organization make a commitment to the Attorney General that this is the need out in the community, this is what we are, and this is what we will be doing once a stamp is given to us. So we need to be guided by those commitments.
So just as a follow-up, Daisam is wondering, so this should be done through an agency and not individually?
That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
For settlement, yes. But legally speaking, any individual resident in Ontario aged 18 plus can make an application, but then it is the prerogative of the Attorney General office to whether they grant or not, because they will really like to look into why this individual is making this application. What is the need out there for him to deliver this service?
Mm-hmm. Okay, wonderful. Any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself and ask or type it in the chat box. We have some time if anyone else has any questions. You're getting a lot of kudos in the chat box, Jagdeep and Agnes, for all the detailed information and excellent presentation. Okay.
I just had a question, Jagdeepji, regarding your follow-up to a question by one of the counselors regarding the passport stamps translation.
Mm-hmm.
Our program officer, we used to kind of do passport stamps translations a few years back, but we got an instruction from our program officer that they should not be done. And we have been actually saying no to our clients. So I'm just wondering, is your agency doing passport stamps?
Okay, yes. So the thing is that if a settlement worker or settlement organization will translate those stamps, say for most of the requests, what I have seen at PMC come from Middle East, because those stamps
Yes.
are typically in Arabic. So if those stamps are translated and then there is an a declaration by the translator that I'm fluent in these two languages and I have translated these stamps to the best of my knowledge, then what happens, it's not about what it becomes a declaration, and that will be acceptable to IRCC. I'm not sure in which context the IRCC officer was making that observation, but if it boils down to the point that we are translating a document, here even a stamp is a document from that strict lens, and we translate it and support it with the written declaration and signed declaration by the translator, it should be good.
Okay.
But then on the IRCC website, there is also a full explanation of who can translate such documents and who cannot.
Yeah, no, we will try that, because I know that the Mississauga Center for Citizenship Exams used to accept ours, and then they suddenly stopped because IRCC guided them that do not kind of take it from, because especially when you talk of the Middle East clients, they have multiple stamps on their passports, and they spend thousands in dollars.
The best is to go to IRCC website. There is a guideline for citizenship.
Sure.
And this is, I think in specific, it says that translations done by such and such person should be fine.
Fine. Perfect. Thank you so much for that.
And I think maybe just to add, what we were sharing, Jagdeep and I, in today's presentation around the translations, it was more in a context of the affidavits, not the translations themselves, but it's the affidavits that the commissioners can witness and can attest to accompany the actual translations. So to your point, Praveen, and I've heard that from other service providers as well, that they've been discouraged to translate documents for clients, but our discussion was in the context of the affidavits. Right. So just to give you an example, at our organization, we would never translate, stamps or any type of documents at our organization, but we would attest the affidavits. Yeah. So, so that is the part that we would support the clients with, or, the translators really, right? But not the translation itself.
Yeah, got you. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so you're actually getting some interesting kudos. Jagdeep is apparently one of the best managers in the world.
Yes.
And everyone thought it was worthy of their time. So I'm just going to leave it open for one more minute just to see if there are any remaining questions, or else we'll give back time to folks. So anyone else have any burning questions while we have the expertise in the room here? Okay. Well, if not, you can email, again, as I mentioned, Cassandra, CBANGAY @uwgt.org for the slides, the recording, and that has Jagdeep and Agnes's email in the slides, as well as our evaluation survey, and that will help us understand what we want to continue to do next year in terms of webinar offerings as well. So maybe we'll close off for now, and just you get a chance to stand up and give Jagdeep and Agnes a standing ovation, and thank you to Praveen and Margarita as well for initiating this session as a follow-up to one that went to the managers earlier in the year. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Jessica.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jagdeep.
And thank you,
Agnes.
Jessica.